In 1324, the richest man who ever lived crossed the desert with mountains of gold, but one forgotten porter carried something heavier than treasure. This is the quiet love story the history books never wrote. Long ago, when the Mali Empire shone brighter than the sun, Emperor Mansa Musa led a caravan so vast it took 8 days to pass any single point. 60,000 souls marched under his banner: porters, slaves, scholars, and warriors. Among them walked Amadou, a simple man who carried salt on his back and dreams in his heart. And among the blue-veiled Tuareg guides walked Fatimata, whose voice could calm a sandstorm. This is their story, told slowly, like the way desert nights unfold, one grain of sand, one heartbeat, one proverb at a time. The sky over Niani was still the color of cooled ash when Amadou opened his eyes. He lay on a thin mat of woven grass inside a low mud brick hut that smelled of yesterday's smoke and the faint soreness of sleeping bodies. The air felt heavy, not yet warmed by the sun. He listened first, always first, to the quiet. A rooster tried once, gave up, and the town held its breath. Only the soft shift of goats outside and the slow grind of a distant mortar told him the world still turned. He rose without a sound. His knees clicked once, the way they had every morning since the rainy season 2 years ago. The floor was cool under his bare feet. He reached for the leather thong that tied his waistcloth, pulled it tight, and knotted it the same way his father had taught him. Left over right, tuck, pull, done. No wasted motion. Outside, the loading yard stretched wide and flat, a pale rectangle of dust where the empire's wealth waited to walk. Rows of salt slabs, white as bleached bone, lay in perfect lines, each slab the length of a man's forearm, each slab exactly 92 pounds. Amadou knew the number the way he knew his own name. He had lifted the same slab every dawn for 3 dry seasons, testing it on the wooden scale that hung from a tamarind branch. The scale had a crack in the left arm. He always placed the weight on the right to balance the lie. He walked the aisle between the slabs. His shadow slid ahead of him, thin and long. At the 3rd row he stopped, crouched, and ran his palm across the nearest block. The surface was rough, crusted with tiny salt crystals that pricked his skin. He pressed his thumb into the corner where yesterday's rope had left a shallow groove. Good. The groove would hold the new knot. From a coil of palm fiber rope, brown, stiff, smelling of palm oil, he cut a length with his small iron knife. The blade was dull. He sawed more than cut. 4 arm spans of rope, no more, no less. He laid the rope on the ground, placed the slab in the center, and began the binding. First the cross wrap. Rope under, over, under again. Then the cinch. Pull until the fiber creaked and the salt groaned. He tied the knot with 3 loops, the way the old men said kept evil spirits from loosening wealth. His fingers moved slow, sure, the same rhythm every morning. When the slab sat secure on his carrying frame, a yoke of baobab wood padded with goatskin, he stood. The weight settled across his shoulders like an old friend who never apologized for being heavy. 92 pounds. He shifted once, felt the balance, and nodded to himself. The yard was waking now. Other porters drifted in, yawning, scratching, adjusting their own loads. Amadou greeted the same 3 men every day. First came Sori, tall and thin, whose left eye wept in the dry wind. Then Modibo, whose laugh started in his belly and ended in a cough. Last came little Czech, barely 16, who still believed the caravan would make him rich. Amadou lifted his right hand, palm open. A single bracelet does not jingle, he said. It was their morning proverb, older than any of them. It meant, alone we are nothing, together we make music. Sori repeated it. Modibo repeated it. Czech repeated it last, voice cracking on the word jingle. They smiled the small smile of men who have said the same thing 1,000 times and will say it 1,000 more. Amadou turned to check the next slab, and stopped. Across the yard, near the camel lines, a woman stood beside a kneeling beast. She wore the indigo veil of the Tuareg, the color so deep it looked wet. The veil covered her hair and the lower half of her face, leaving only her eyes visible, dark, calm, unhurried. She held the camel's lead rope in one hand and with the other adjusted the wooden saddle. Not roughly, not quickly. She slid her fingers along the leather girth, testing each buckle as if the animal's comfort mattered more than the coming march. The camel flicked an ear. She answered by loosening the strap half a finger's width, then tightening it again until the fit was perfect. Amadou watched. He did not mean to stare, but the morning had taught him slowness, and slowness kept his eyes where they fell. The woman's hands moved like water finding its level. When she finished, she laid her palm flat on the camel's neck, whispered something too soft to hear, and the beast lowered its head as if in agreement. She straightened. For a moment the veil slipped. Just enough to show the line of her cheek, the small scar near her mouth like a comma. Then the cloth settled back into place. She turned, and her gaze crossed the yard and found Amadou's. No startle, no smile, only the quiet weight of being seen. 3 heartbeats. 4. Then she looked away, already reaching for the next camel. Amadou felt the salt on his back shift, though he had not moved. The weight was the same 92 pounds, but something inside it had changed. From the palace gate came the caravan master's bronze bell. One clear note, held long, then released. The sound floated over the loading yard like a bird that had forgotten how to land. Porters straightened. Camels grumbled. The emperor's banner, a rectangle of green silk with a golden horsetail, rose on its pole and caught the first real light of day. The bell rang again, shorter this time. A command. Amadou drew a slow breath, tasting dust and palm oil and the faint salt on his own lips. He adjusted the yoke across his shoulders, felt the rope bite, and took the first step toward the northern road. Behind him, 60,000 footsteps waited to follow. Ahead, the Sahara opened its wide, hot mouth. The march had begun. The caravan moved like a slow snake across the red earth. 15 miles a day. No more, no less. The emperor's scribes had measured it with knotted cords and sundials, and 15 miles was the law. Amadou learned the rhythm the way a baby learns its mother's heartbeat. 1 foot, then the other, then the first again. left, right, left. The salt slab rocked gently on the yoke, 92 pounds pressing a groove into each shoulder that never quite healed. The sounds never changed. Leather creaked where the ropes rubbed the wooden frames. Camels coughed wet, angry coughs that ended in long strings of spit. Sandals slapped the ground. Slap, drag, slap, until the noise became a single dull drum inside the skull. Every third step, a porter somewhere cleared his throat and spat. The spit dried before it hit the sand. At noon the sun stood directly overhead, a white coin nailed to the sky. Shadows shrank to nothing. The caravan master raised a green flag, and the column halted. Men dropped where they stood. Amadou lowered his load beside a thornbush no taller than his knee. He sat on the hot ground, back against the salt, and closed his eyes. The slab was warm now, almost hot, like a sleeping animal. Evening came slowly. The sun bled orange across the dunes, and the air cooled 1 careful degree at a time. The caravan stopped beside a dry riverbed where tamarisk trees grew in crooked lines. Fires were lit, small, neat, using camel dung collected at the last camp. The smell was sharp, familiar, almost sweet. Amadou's group, Sori, Madibo, Chek, and 2 others, gathered around their fire. They had 1 iron pot, black with age, and a sack of millet that had to last until Taghaza. Every grain was counted. Madibo poured a handful into the pot, exactly 120 grains for 6 men. He counted aloud, finger tapping each grain. 1, 2, 3. Chek tried to sneak an extra pinch. Sori slapped his hand. The stomach is a bad accountant, he said. They all laughed the same tired laugh. Water was rationed in a leather flask capped with a wooden stopper. Each man received 1 swallow. Amadou tilted the flask, felt the cool weight on his tongue, swallowed once, and passed it on. The flask came back empty. Someone always drank the last drop. They needed more millet. The caravan's supply camels carried sacks, but the porters were last in line. Amadou stood, brushed dust from his knees, and walked to the supply circle where traders set up after prayers. 3 Tuareg men sat cross-legged on a carpet the color of storm clouds. In front of them, millet, dried dates, a twist of tobacco no longer than a finger. Amadou squatted. As-salam alaikum, he said. Wa alaikum as-salam, the oldest trader answered. His beard was henna red, his teeth stained green from cola nuts. Amadou opened his small leather pouch and spilled 2 cowrie shells onto the carpet. They clicked softly. 2 cowries for 1 handful of millet, he said. The trader picked up a shell, held it to the firelight, turned it over. These shells have holes. Bad luck. 3 cowries. 2. Amadou said. The holes let the evil out. The trader smiled without warmth. Evil stays where it wants. 3. They went back and forth like this. 2, 3, 2.5, 3, 2 date, until the fire burned low and the other porters shifted impatiently. Amadou felt the familiar knot in his stomach. Without the millet, tomorrow would be hunger. Then a shadow fell across the carpet. Indigo cloth, silver bracelets quiet on the wrist. Fatimata knelt beside the trader. Her uncle, Amadou, realized, and spoke in Tamajak, quick and low. The old man listened, eyes on the shells. He nodded once. 2 cowries, he said in Bambara. And you carry water for my sister's tent tonight. Amadou looked up. Fatimata's veil had slipped just enough to show her mouth. The scar near the corner curved when she almost smiled. Their eyes met. 1 second. 2. 3. The fire crackled. A camel groaned far away. Neither of them blinked. He found his voice. Agreed. The trader scooped a handful of millet. Generous, almost overflowing, and poured it into Amadou's cloth. The grains were warm from the fire. Amadou tied the cloth with the same palm fiber rope he used for salt, tucked it under his arm, and stood. Fatimata rose too. For a moment they stood close enough to smell each other's sweat. His of salt and dust, hers of camel and indigo dye. She reached to adjust the millet sack on his shoulder. Her fingers brushed the yoke strap. Neither moved away. Back at the fire, Madibo raised an eyebrow. You paid 2 cowries and smiled like a bridegroom. What magic is this? Amadou sat, opened the cloth, and poured the millet into the pot. The river cuts the rock not by force, but by patience, he said. Czech snorted. You and your proverbs. Next you'll say the desert gave you a wife. Amadou said nothing. He stared into the flames and saw indigo cloth and a scar like a comma. The millet boiled. The night deepened. Somewhere a jackal cried once and was silent. The caravan would march again at dawn. 15 miles. Left, right, left. But tonight the rhythm felt different, like a drum that had found a new beat hidden inside the old one. 10 dawns had passed since the caravan left Niani. The sun rose red now, filtered through dust that hung in the air like flour. The land had flattened into a plain of cracked earth where nothing grew except patience. The column stretched longer than the eye could follow. 60,000 souls reduced to a single moving line that left a pale scar across the desert. Night came quickly once the sun dropped. The caravan master chose a hollow between 2 low dunes, a place where the wind would be blocked for a few hours. The Tuareg knew these pockets the way fishermen know tides. Fatimata's family always pitched their tents on the eastern edge, closest to the camels, farthest from the emperor's silk pavilions. Amadou watched them from his own small fire. He had learned the order of their work. First, the youngest brother, barely 12, drove 4 iron pegs into the sand with a stone. The pegs were old, pitted, each one hammered flat on the striking end. He placed them in a perfect square, 6 paces to a side. Then came the uncles, unfolding the tent of black goat hair and indigo cotton. The cloth was heavy, smelling of smoke and camel fat. They raised the center pole, acacia wood, polished smooth by years of hands, and the tent bloomed open like a dark flower. Fatimata worked the guy ropes. She walked each line to its peg, knelt, and tested the tension with 2 fingers. If the rope sagged, she twisted it 1/2 turn clockwise. If it hummed too tight, she eased it counterclockwise. She never hurried. When the last rope was set, she stood back, hands on hips, and studied the angles the way a mason studies a wall. Only when the tent leaned exactly 45 degrees against the wind did she nod once and move on. Amadou's own group had no tent. They slept under the sky, wrapped in thin blankets that smelled of salt and sweat. But tonight the air carried a bite. The stars were sharp, the kind of cold that crept into bones. Amadou's water goatskin was nearly empty. 7 liters at dawn, now less than 2. He lifted it, felt the slosh, and made the calculation every porter made. 1 swallow for the night, 1 for the morning, 1 to share if someone collapsed. He stood. The sand was cool under his feet. He walked the short distance to the Tuareg camp, goatskin hanging from his shoulder. The fire there was small, built inside a circle of stones no wider than a cooking pot. Fatimata's mother stirred a pot of millet porridge with a wooden spoon worn thin in the middle. The smell drifted across the sand. Warm grain, a hint of fermented milk. Amadou stopped at the edge of the light. As Salam Alaikum, he said again, softer this time. Fatimata's father looked up. He was a thin man with a face like carved ebony, eyes set deep under a white turban. Wa alaikum as-salam, salt carrier. You bring water. Amadou held out the goatskin. For the tent of the guide who speaks for the camels. The old man took it, weighed it in one hand, and passed it to Fatimata without a word. She uncorked the skin, poured a thin stream into a clay cup, and drank once. Then she filled the cup again and offered it to Amadou. The cup was warm from her hand. He drank. The water tasted of leather and earth and something faintly sweet. Perhaps the milk residue in the cup. When he lowered it, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. Fatimata's mother ladled porridge into 2 wooden bowls. 1 for her husband, 1 for the guest. Amadou sat on a folded blanket, legs crossed. The family spoke little. The youngest brother chewed noisily. An aunt hummed a tune with no words. Fatimata sat across the fire, 10 feet away, her back to the tent pole. The flames painted moving shadows on her veil. They ate in silence. The porridge was thick, sticky, tasting of ash and sour milk. Amadou scraped the bowl clean with his thumb. When he finished, he set the bowl down and looked up. The sky was a bowl of black glass filled with stars. He counted them the way he counted millet grains. Slowly, to make the moment last. Fatimata followed his gaze. She lifted one hand and pointed. That one is Taghaza, she said, voice low. The camel who carries the moon on his back. Her finger moved. And there, Anakef, the lost goat. She wanders until the rains come. Amadou nodded. He knew different names for the stars, but he did not correct her. The fire settled into coals. Somewhere a camel sighed. The night pressed close. Fatimata stood. She walked to the tent flap, lifted it, and disappeared inside. A moment later she returned with a small clay cup of sour milk. She crossed the sand, no hurry, sandals whispering, and stopped in front of Amadou. She held out the cup. He took it. Their eyes met over the rim. No words. Just the soft pop of a coal shifting. He drank. The milk was thick, cold, sharp on his tongue. When he lowered the cup, she was still there. The firelight caught the edge of her veil and turned it silver. For the first time, she smiled. Not wide, not loud, just the corners of her mouth lifting, the scar near her lip bending like a secret. Amadou felt the smile settle in his chest, warm as the milk. He handed the cup back. Their fingers touched again, longer this time. 10 feet of sand between them, but the space felt smaller than a heartbeat. Behind them, the camp settled. Fires dimmed. A baby cried once and was hushed. The wind moved across the dunes, carrying the smell of cooling sand. Amadou stood. He bowed his head to the old man, to the mother, to the tent. Then he walked back to his own place, the empty goatskin swinging at his side. He lay down on his blanket. The stars wheeled overhead. He did not count them anymore. He listened instead to the soft breathing of 60,000 sleepers, to the creak of a camel shifting its weight, to the memory of a smile that had no sound. The night was long, and the cold was deep, but something inside Amadou stayed warm. The third week began with a sky the color of old brass. The caravan had left the tamarisk plains and entered a land of gravel and stone where even the wind sounded tired. The porter's sandals wore thin. The camel's pads cracked and bled. 15 miles a day, still the law, but the law felt heavier now, like a chain forged from heat. On the 11th morning after the last water hole, the air changed. It grew thick, tasting of metal. The camels lifted their heads and sniffed. The Tuareg guides, Fatimata among them, stopped singing to the animals and began scanning the horizon. A low ridge of cloud sat in the west, not white, not gray, but the dull yellow of a lion's eye. By noon the cloud had swallowed half the sky. The caravan master raised the red flag. Storm warning. Porters dropped their loads where they stood. The order rippled down the line in whispers. Wet the scarves. Tie the camel's nose to tail. Count your breaths. Amadou knew the drill. He had seen 2 small storms already. Nothing more than wind and a handful of rain that hissed into steam before it touched the ground. This felt different. He unwrapped the strip of cotton he kept around his neck, dipped it into his last half cup of water, and tied it across his mouth and nose. The cloth went dark with moisture. He checked the knots on his salt slab. 3 loops, still tight, then helped Sori lash the 2 yokes together with spare rope. Madibo and Chek did the same. 4 men, 2 slabs, 1 bundle to keep the wind from stealing their cargo. The Tuareg moved faster. Fatimata's family had already folded their tent into a tight roll and buried it under a dune with only the center pole sticking up like a marker. The camels were knelt in a circle, heads inward, ropes linked so tightly that the animals formed a living wall. Fatimata walked the line, checking each knot. She wore a second veil now, pulled across her eyes, leaving only a slit for sight. Her indigo cloak snapped like a banner. Amadou watched her from 20 paces away. The wind was rising. Sand began to hiss along the ground like dry rain. He wanted to call out, to offer help, but the storm took his voice. Instead he finished tying his own group's water skins to the camel nearest them. 3 skins, 1 cracked, total less than 4 liters for 6 men. The first gust hit like a slap. The sky turned the color of camel dung. Sand rose in sheets, stinging eyes, filling ears, finding every fold of cloth. Visibility dropped to the length of an arm. Amadou crouched behind the linked camels, head down, arms over the salt. The wind screamed. The temperature fell 10 degrees in a minute. Somewhere a child wailed and was silenced. He counted breaths the way the old men taught. Inhale 4 heartbeats, hold 4, exhale 4. 1, 2, 3. The sand found the gap between his scarf and neck, worked its way down his back, settled cold against his skin. He shifted the scarf higher. 4, 5, 6. Time stretched. The storm had its own clock. Amadou lost track of the caravan, of Sori and Madibo, of everything except the rope in his hand and the camel's warm flank against his shoulder. The animal trembled. He pressed closer, sharing heat. Then, through the roar, a sound, 3 notes, high and clear, repeated. A Tuareg lullaby. Fatimata's voice. She was singing to the camels, but the notes cut through the wind like a blade. Amadou turned his head. He could see nothing but yellow haze. He stood, one hand on the rope, and took a step into the storm. Another. The lullaby grew louder, guiding him the way a star guides a sailor. He found her beside a half-buried dune, kneeling next to a small leather tent no larger than a dog kennel. The tent was pitched in the lee of the camels, anchored with rocks and the weight of 2 water barrels. Fatimata's hands moved over the guy ropes, testing, tightening. When she saw Amadou, she did not speak. She simply lifted the tent flap and pointed inside. He crawled in after her. The space was tight, barely room for 2 bodies and the storm's noise. The tent smelled of goat hair, smoke, and the sharp sweetness of crushed mint leaves someone had scattered to keep scorpions away. A single oil lamp burned low, its flame steady in the sealed air. On the sand floor lay a prayer mat, a broken comb missing 3 teeth, a handful of dates wrapped in cloth, and a small leather pouch that clinked softly when the wind rocked the tent. Fatimata pulled the flap closed. The storm's roar dropped to a muffled growl. She sat cross-legged, back against the tent wall, and unwrapped her outer veil. Her face was dusted with sand. The scar near her mouth stood out white against her skin. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, then looked at Amadou. He sat opposite her, knees almost touching hers. The lamp painted soft shadows on the tent walls. Outside, the wind howled like 1,000 jinn. Inside, the only sound was their breathing. 6 hours, the storm lasted. 6 hours in a space no wider than a grave. They did not speak much. Words felt too loud. Instead, Fatimata opened the pouch and took out a single date. She split it with her thumbnail, removed the pit, and offered half to Amadou. He took it. The fruit was dry, almost hard, but sweet. They chewed slowly. She showed him the broken comb. My grandmother's, she said, voice barely above the wind. She said broken things carry better stories. Amadou turned the comb in his fingers. The missing teeth left gaps like missing days. He nodded. He offered the prayer mat. She spread it between them. They knelt, foreheads to the sand, Not praying, just resting. The mat smelled of many deserts. At one point the tent sagged under a heavy gust. Sand poured through a seam. Fatimata pressed her shoulder against the wall. Amadou pressed beside her. Their bodies touched from shoulder to hip. Neither moved away. The tent held. When the wind finally eased, the silence felt louder than the storm. Fatimata lifted the flap. The sky was the color of ash, the dunes reshaped into new hills. The caravan lay scattered but intact. Camels stood blinking. Porters emerged like ghosts, shaking sand from their clothes. Amadou crawled out first. The cold bit his wet scarf. He turned to offer Fatimata his hand. She took it. Her palm was rough, warm. They stood together in the quiet aftermath, the broken comb still in her other hand, the taste of date on both their tongues. The storm had taken nothing but time, and given them 6 hours no one else would ever know about. The storm left the desert scrubbed clean. Dunes wore new curves, sharp as knife edges. The caravan looked smaller somehow, as if the wind had blown away the edges of 60,000 lives. Men walked with heads down, shaking sand from ears and sleeves. Camels limped on cracked paths. The emperor's green banner hung limp, dusted gray. By late afternoon the column reached a place the Tuareg called Tindouma*, the dried tears. An old oasis, long dead. A circle of date palms stood like skeletons, trunks split, fronds brown and rattling. Beneath them the sand was darker, cooler. Someone had dug here before. Shallow pits scarred the ground like old wounds. The caravan master ordered a halt. Water was the only thought now. The supply camels carried less than a day's ration for the animals, half that for men. Scouts rode ahead at dawn and returned with empty hands. No wells, no seeps, only the memory of water under the palms. Digging began at once. Every man who could lift a stick or a bowl took a place in the circle. Amadou knelt between Sori and Chek. The sand was soft at first, almost kind. He scooped with his hands, piling it behind him in neat mounds. 1 foot down. 2. The hole widened. His fingers found a layer of clay, pale and damp to the touch. Hope flickered. At 4 feet the clay turned wet. A dark stain spread under his nails. He dug faster. The hole filled with shadows. Someone shouted. Water, brackish, thick as soup, the color of weak tea, seeped in slowly. Men crowded close. Amadou stepped back, letting others drink first. He watched Fatimata's family work their own pit 20 paces away. She knelt at the edge, veil pushed up to her forehead, hair tied with a strip of indigo cloth. Her hands moved in steady circles, passing a wooden bowl from digger to drinker. Filtering took time. They had no proper cloth left. Fatimata tore a strip from the hem of her cloak, folded it twice, and laid it over a clay pot. The water dripped through drop by drop, carrying grit and the faint smell of rotten leaves. Amadou waited his turn. When the pot reached him, he lifted it carefully. The water tasted of earth and iron and something ancient. He swallowed once, felt it slide cold into his empty stomach, and passed the pot on. The digging went on until sunset. The oasis yielded enough for 1 swallow per man, 2 for the camels. The rest was saved in goatskins patched with palm gum. Night fell purple and sudden. Fires were forbidden. Too little dung, too much wind. The camp lay in darkness broken only by starlight and the low glow of a few oil lamps. A market rose anyway, small and quiet. Men traded what little they had left. A porter offered a cracked leather belt for 3 dates. Another swapped a prayer bead for a pinch of tea. Amadou walked the circle with his last salt slab balanced on his shoulder. The slab had shrunk, 92 pounds at Niani, now barely 70. Chunks had been chipped away for cooking, for trade, for luck. He found the trader from the first week, the one with the henna beard. The man sat on a blanket, a single lamp beside him. In front of him, a twist of tobacco, a small sack of millet, and 1 silver ring, thin as a reed, cracked down the middle. Amadou lowered the salt slab. "How much?" he asked. The trader picked up the ring, turned it so the crack caught the light. "1 slab," he said. "The ring is old. Berber work. Brings safe travel." Amadou hesitated. The salt was his wage, his future, his proof of labor. But the ring glinted, and he saw Fatimata's wrist, bare except for a leather cord. He nodded. The trader wrapped the salt in cloth, tucked it under his arm, and handed over the ring. It was warm from the lamp. Amadou slipped it into his pouch, the cracked silver cool against his fingers. He found Fatimata beside the date palms. She sat on a root, mending a tear in her cloak with a bone needle and thread pulled from the hem. The lamp at her feet threw a circle of gold. Amadou approached slowly, sandals silent on the soft sand. When he was 3 paces away, she looked up. Her eyes reflected the lamp like still water. He knelt. The sand was cool now, almost damp. He opened his pouch and took out the ring. Held it between thumb and finger. The crack ran clean through the band, but the silver still shone. "For you," he said. His voice came out rough, unused. Fatimata set the needle down. She took the ring, turned it once, twice. The crack caught the light. She slipped it onto her right thumb. It fit loose, spinning when she moved. She said nothing. The night pressed close. A camel snorted somewhere. The palms rattled overhead like dry bones. Amadou waited. The silence grew heavy, not uncomfortable, but full. Finally Fatimata spoke, soft as wind through grass. "Love is a desert rose. It grows where nothing should." She closed her fist around the ring. The lamp flame danced. Neither moved. The oasis held its breath. Behind them, the camp settled into uneasy sleep. Men curled around their water skins like mothers with infants. The stars wheeled slow and indifferent. Amadou stayed kneeling until his knees ached. When he stood, Fatimata stood with him. She touched the ring once, then let her hand fall. They parted without another word. Amadou walked back to his place under the palms. He lay down, the cracked earth hard beneath his shoulder blades. The ring was gone, but its weight lingered in his palm. He closed his eyes and saw indigo cloth, a scar like a comma, a circle of lamplight no wider than a heart. The caravan would march at dawn. 15 miles. The oasis would shrink to a memory. But tonight the desert rose bloomed, silent and stubborn, in the space between two people who had not yet learned each other's names for tomorrow. The halfway moon hung low and pale, the color of watered milk. The caravan had walked 21 days since Niani, and the land now belonged to salt and silence. The porter's feet had worn paths so deep that the sand remembered their shape. 15 miles a day, still the law, but the law had grown teeth. On the 22nd morning the emperor ordered the gold inspection. It was not a grand ceremony. No trumpets, no drums, just a quiet ritual that happened every new moon. The gold bearers, 500 strong, formed a line that curved like a crescent around the royal tent. Each man carried a staff of solid gold, thick as a child's wrist, wrapped in red cloth to keep the sun from blinding the eyes. The staffs were the emperor's gift to the world, proof that Mali's wealth could buy cities. Amadou's group had no gold to guard, only salt. They stood at the edge of the inspection ground, watching. The air smelled of hot metal and camel sweat. The scribes sat cross-legged on a carpet of woven grass, bronze scales in front of them, wet clay tablets ready. Each staff was unwrapped, weighed, measured, recorded. The process was slow, boring, exact. First the cloth was folded. 4 folds, always 4. Then the staff laid on the scale. The left pan held the gold. The right held iron weights shaped like tiny lions. The scribe adjusted until the beam balanced. He pressed a reed stylus into the clay. Staff 312 to 4 pounds 3 ounces. Niani mint. Asterisk the tablet was set in the sun to dry. The cloth was refolded, the staff rewrapped. Next man. Amadou counted the staffs as they passed. 150 by the time the sun reached the top of the royal banner. His own load felt lighter today. He had given away another chunk of salt at the oasis. 3 pounds to a sick child's mother for a handful of dates. 70 pounds left. The yoke sat higher on his shoulders, almost comfortable. Fatimata stood with the Tuareg guides near the camels. She wore the silver ring on a leather cord around her neck now, hidden beneath her veil. Amadou saw the cord when she bent to tighten a girth strap. The sight settled in his chest like a warm stone. The inspection moved to the porter's loads. Not for gold, but for order. Every slab of salt had to be accounted. The emperor's steward walked the lines with a tally stick, carving a notch for each slab. When he reached Amadou's group, he paused. Sori's slab was intact. Madibo's had a fresh corner missing. Check's was cracked clean through the middle. And yours? The steward asked Amadou. Amadou lowered his yoke. The salt gleamed white in the sun, smaller than it had been at Niani, but whole. The steward ran a finger along the edge, nodded, carved a notch. He moved on. That evening the camp settled beside a low ridge of red rock. Fires were allowed again. Small, careful, fed with twigs gathered by children. Amadou's group cooked their millet with the last of the oasis water. The pot bubbled thick and slow. Check stirred with a stick, counting turns aloud. 1 for the emperor, 1 for the camels, 1 for luck. After eating, Amadou walked to the Tuareg tents. Fatimata's father sat outside, sharpening a knife on a whetstone. The scrape of metal on stone was steady, hypnotic. Amadou stopped at a respectful distance. As-salam alaikum, uncle, he said. Wa alaikum as-salam, salt carrier. The old man did not look up. You walk with a lighter step today. Amadou hesitated. Then he reached under his waistcloth and drew out one of the emperor's gold staffs. Small, no longer than his forearm, taken from the inspection line when no one watched. He had carried it hidden beneath his salt slab for 3 days, wrapped in his spare scarf. The red cloth was gone. The gold shone dull in the firelight. Fatimata's father stopped sharpening. He took the staff, weighed it in his palm. His eyes narrowed. This is bride price, Amadou said. His voice was steady, though his heart beat loud enough to drown the fire. For your daughter, if she will have me. The old man turned the staff once, twice. The knife lay forgotten on his knee. From the tent flap, Fatimata watched. The silver ring glinted at her throat. Silence stretched. A camel coughed. The whetstone cooled. Finally the old man spoke. Gold is heavy. It bends the back and blinds the eyes. My daughter guides caravans. She needs a man who sees the path, not the shine. He handed the staff back. Amadou took it, the metal warm now from the old man's hand. He bowed his head and walked away. Later, when the moon was high, Fatimata found him beside the rock ridge. She carried a small bundle wrapped in indigo cloth. She sat without speaking. Amadou sat beside her. The gold staff lay between them like a sleeping snake. My father is wise, she said at last. But wisdom is a slow camel. It arrives late. She opened the bundle. Inside, the silver ring on its cord, a twist of cola nuts, a strip of dried camel meat. She placed the ring in Amadou's hand. Keep this. The gold. Return it before the next inspection. A porter caught with the emperor's staff loses his hands. Amadou closed his fingers around the ring. And us. Fatimata looked at the stars. We walk the same road. 15 miles a day. That is time enough to learn if love is heavier than gold. She stood. The indigo cloth whispered. She touched the cord at her neck where the ring had been, then walked back to her tent. Amadou stayed on the ridge until the moon moved west. He slipped the gold staff into the sand at the base of the rock, buried it shallow, marked the spot with a pebble. The emperor would have one less staff. The desert would keep the secret. Whispers began the next morning. A staff missing. Guards searched loads, questioned porters. Amadou stood calm while they lifted his salt slab, checked the yoke, moved on. The ring burned warm against his chest, hidden under his waistcloth. The caravan marched 15 miles. The gold inspection was over, but the wait of choices had only begun. The Taghaza salt mines lay like a white scar across the desert's face. The caravan reached them on the 29th day, the air so dry it cracked lips before the sun was fully up. The mines were not holes in the ground but open wounds. Vast flats where slaves chipped salt from the earth in perfect cubes, each cube the size of a man's head. Each cube worth more than gold in the markets south of the Sahara. The camp spread around the mines in orderly rings. The emperor's tents went up first, silk walls shimmering like heat mirage. Then the gold bearers, then the camel handlers, then the Tuareg guides. The porters came last, assigned a corner near the slag heaps where the wind carried the smell of sweat and brine. Amadou's group staked their place beside a pile of broken picks. The ground was white with salt dust. Every footprint stayed forever. Labor began at dawn. The slaves, men and women chained at the ankles, worked in lines, singing the same song over and over. The tune had no words, only a rhythm: chip, lift, stack, chip, lift, stack. 100 times an hour, 1,000 times a day. The song kept the picks moving in unison. Amadou listened as he unloaded his salt slab. The slab was down to 60 pounds now, edges rounded from travel. He set it with the others in a neat row, then joined the porters tasked with loading fresh cubes onto the camels. The sun climbed. Heat rose from the white ground in waves. Men worked bare-chested, skin filmed with salt that burned cuts and cracks. Amadou's shoulders ached from the yoke, but the new work was different: bend, lift, carry, stack. The cubes were heavy, slick, sharp-edged. Each one left a white mark on his palms. By noon his hands were raw, fingers stiff. He wrapped them in strips torn from his spare cloth. At the hottest hour the overseer rang a bell. Work stopped. Men collapsed in the shade of half-loaded camels. Water came in clay jars guarded by spearmen. One swallow each, no more. Amadou took his turn, felt the water slide down his throat like a promise, then passed the jar. Czech tried to sneak a second sip. The spearman tapped his wrist with the flat of the blade. Czech let go. Fatimata worked with the Tuareg women, sorting cubes by size. They sat in a line under a goat hair awning, veils pushed back, hands quick as birds. She taught the song to the new slaves, her voice low and steady, matching the rhythm of the picks. Amadou heard her from across the flats. Chip, lift, stack, chip, lift, stack. But woven into the work chant were other words, soft, almost hidden, love words in Tamajak. Tanarawen asterisk. The deserts. Ehan. My heart. Amanar asterisk. The stars. She sang them on the offbeat, so only those who knew the language caught the meaning. Evening brought relief. The sun sank red behind the slag heaps, and the temperature dropped fast. Fires were lit in iron braziers. The salt flats reflected the flames like a lake of blood. Amadou's group shared a pot of millet thickened with crushed locusts. Protein, the cook said, better than meat. They ate in silence, too tired for talk. After the meal Amadou walked to the edge of the slave pens. The chains had been removed for the night. The workers sat in circles, rubbing salve into cracked skin. Fatimata was there, passing a clay pot of shea butter. She saw him and tilted her head. A small motion, almost nothing. He followed. They met behind the tallest salt pile, a white mountain 20 feet high. The air smelled of brine and smoke. The pile cast a long shadow. Within it they were hidden from the camp. Fatimata sat on a broken cube, legs crossed. Amadou sat beside her. The salt was still warm from the day's sun. She began to sing again, softer now, the work song stripped to its bones. Chip, lift, stack. But the hidden words grew clearer. You are the water I carry in my heart. You are the star that guides my camel. Amadou listened. When she finished, the silence felt full. He reached into his pouch and drew out the silver ring on its leather cord. The crack caught the faint light. I returned the gold, he said. Buried it under the red ridge. The desert keeps better secrets than men. Fatimata took the ring, slipped it onto her finger. It spun loose, but she did not seem to mind. She leaned close. Their shoulders touched. The salt pile loomed above them, white and silent. Amadou turned his head. Her veil had slipped. He saw the scar near her mouth, the curve of her cheek. He leaned in. She met him halfway. Their lips touched. Dry, salty, tasting of dust and shea butter. The kiss was brief, no longer than a heartbeat, but it carried the weight of 29 days of walking. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. The salt song echoed faintly from the pens. Chip, lift, stack. A drum sounded from the caravan master's tent. 3 sharp beats. Dawn in 4 hours. The caravan would load the new salt and march at first light. Amadou stood. Fatimata stood with him. She touched the ring once, then let her hand fall. They walked back separately. Amadou to his place among the porters, Fatimata to the Tuareg tents. The salt flats gleamed under the rising moon, a white road leading north. Tomorrow the cubes would ride on camel backs, and the song would follow. Chip, lift, stack, love hidden in the offbeat. The desert kept their secret, and the salt kept their kiss. The last salt cube was lashed to the final camel before the stars had faded. The caravan left Taghaza in a white haze, the new load heavier than any before. Each animal carried 8 cubes now, 400 pounds of salt balanced on wooden saddles padded with goat hair. The camels groaned at every step, but the Tuareg knew how to coax them. A soft click of the tongue, a palm pressed to the neck, a whispered promise of rest. Fatimata walked the line, adjusting ropes, checking girths, her indigo veil bright against the pale dawn. Amadou's salt slab was gone, traded for the fresh cubes. He carried a water skin instead. 8 liters, the weight familiar but sloshing now, alive. The yoke felt strange without the solid press of salt. He walked lighter, almost floating, the silver ring warm against his chest on its leather cord. 15 miles a day became 12, then 10. The camels set the pace. Water rations were cut to 1 cup per man at dawn, 1 at dusk. Lips cracked, eyes sank. The song from the mines followed them. Chip, lift, stack, sung under breath by porters who had learned it in Taghaza. Fatimata's hidden love words rode the rhythm still. Ehen, Amanar, Tanarawen. On the 35th night the caravan camped beside a dry wadi where acacia thorns grew thick as spears. The moon was a thin blade. Fires were small, fed with camel dung and the last of the locust wings. Amadou's group sat in the usual circle. The pot held only water now, boiled with a handful of wild herbs a child had found. They drank it hot, passing the single cup hand to hand. After the meal, Amadou walked to the camel lines. The animals knelt in rows, heads low, chewing cud with slow, patient jaws. Fatimata was there, checking a lame beast. She knelt, running her fingers along the cracked pad, pressing gently. The camel sighed. She looked up when Amadou's shadow fell across her. He crouched. "How many days to Cairo?" he asked. She counted on her fingers, the silver ring catching moonlight. 20, if the wells hold. 25 if they don't. He nodded. 20 days of thirst ahead. He reached into his pouch and drew out 3 gold nuggets. His porter's wage, earned 1 per week of march, paid in Taghaza. Each nugget was the size of a date pit, heavy, warm from his body. He placed them in her palm. "For us," he said. "When we reach the city. A room. A camel. A new life." Fatimata closed her fingers around the gold. Her eyes searched his face. "My tribe needs me," she said. "The camels know my voice. The desert knows my step." Amadou felt the old weight settle in his chest, heavier than salt. "And me?" he asked. "Do I know your step?" She looked at the nuggets, then at the ring on her finger. The camel shifted, bells tinkling softly. Somewhere a jackal barked once and was silent. "I know your heart," she said at last. "But the desert is a jealous lover. It gives nothing back." She pressed the nuggets into his hand, folded his fingers over them. "Keep these. Buy your freedom first. Then come find me." Amadou wanted to argue, to promise, to swear by every star above. But the look in her eyes stopped him. Steady, calm, the same look she gave a storm-tossed camel. He slipped the gold back into his pouch. The ring stayed against his skin. They stood together in the moonlight. The camel lowered its head, nudging Fatimata's shoulder. She scratched its ear, whispered in Tamajak. Amadou watched her hands. Rough, sure, the hands that had tied tents at 45 degrees, that had sung love into a work song, that had held his face for one salt-tasting kiss. A drum beat from the center of camp. 2 slow notes. Time to sleep. Tomorrow the march would begin again, slower now, the camels setting a pace that mocked the old law of 15 miles. Amadou walked back to his place. He lay down under the acacias, the thorns pricking his blanket. The gold nuggets pressed against his ribs like 3 small hearts. Fatimata stayed with the camels. He heard her voice, low and steady, singing the lullaby that had guided him through the storm. The notes floated across the wadi, weaving love and duty into the same thread. He closed his eyes. The desert was wide, the road long, but the song followed him into sleep. Ehen, Amana, Tanarawen. My heart, the stars, the deserts. The final stretch to Cairo began with the taste of dust in every breath. The caravan had thinned. Camels lost to cracked pads, porters to fever, water skins to leaks. The column now numbered 40,000, a shadow of its Niani glory. The salt cubes rode high on the animals' backs, white as bones, clinking softly with each step. 10 miles a day now, sometimes 8. The desert no longer asked. It commanded. Water was measured in sips. 1 cup at dawn, held in the mouth until it warmed, then swallowed. 1 cup at dusk, shared if a child cried. Amadou's skin had turned to leather, his lips split in 3 places. The gold nuggets in his pouch were his only wealth, 3 small suns against his heart. The silver ring on its cord had worn a groove into his chest. Fatimata walked with the lead camels, her voice the thread that kept the animals moving. She sang no love words now. The song was for survival, short, sharp notes that told the camels rest soon, water soon, hold on. The Tuareg had painted their faces with indigo paste to shield from sun. Her cheeks were dark blue, the scar near her mouth a pale slash. She spared Amadou 1 glance each dawn, no more. Duty had claimed her fully. On the 42nd night the caravan camped beside a dune so tall it blocked half the sky. The wind came from the north, cool for the first time, carrying a faint smell of river mud. Cairo was close. 3 days, maybe 2. The camp buzzed with the quiet fever of an ending. Men sharpened knives, mended clothes, counted coins. Amadou's group had 1 pot of millet left, enough for a thin gruel. They ate it cold, passing the spoon. After eating, Amadou walked to the supply circle. The market was frantic now. Prices crashed as gold flooded the desert. A gold staff bought 3 onions, a nugget a cup of Nile water carried south by scouts. Amadou found a narrow alley between 2 tents, a tiny room for rent above a dye shop. The landlord, a thin Egyptian with henna'd hands, wanted 3 gold dinars. Amadou offered his 3 nuggets. The man bit each one, nodded, and led him up a ladder. The room was no wider than a camel's stall. A reed mat, a clay lamp, a cracked window overlooking the alley. 42 steps from street to door. He counted them twice. The air smelled of indigo and piss, but it was shelter. He paid 1 nugget, kept 2. The landlord gave him a key carved from bone. That night he found Fatimata by the camels. She was brushing sand from a lame animal's flank, her movements slow with exhaustion. The moon was full, washing the dunes silver. Amadou stopped 3 paces away. I have a room, he said. In Cairo. 42 steps up. A mat, a lamp, enough for 2. Fatimata did not look up. Her hands kept moving over the camel's hide. My father has arranged a marriage, she said. A Tuareg trader from Gao. He brings 20 camels. My tribe will eat for a year. The words landed like stones. Amadou felt the desert tilt. And us. She straightened. The indigo paste on her face had cracked, showing the skin beneath. Us was a song in the offbeat. The desert does not keep songs. She reached under her veil and drew out the silver ring on its cord. The crack had widened. The band was almost split. She pressed it into his hand. Keep this. Remember the storm. Remember the kiss that tasted of salt. Amadou closed his fingers around the ring. It was cold now, lifeless. Happiness is a guest. It stays only if invited, he said, the proverb bitter on his tongue. Fatimata's eyes filled, but no tears fell. The desert drank them first. She touched his cheek once, thumb brushing the split in his lip, then turned and walked back to the Tuareg tents. Her shadow stretched long across the sand, then vanished. Amadou stood alone under the moon. The camels sighed. The wind carried the smell of river, close now, almost real. He climbed the dune behind the camp, sat at the crest, and opened his hand. The ring lay broken in his palm, two halves of a circle that would never close. Below, the caravan slept its last desert sleep. Tomorrow the gates of Cairo would open, and the gold would pour out like water. Amadou slipped the broken ring into his pouch beside the two remaining nuggets. He would buy the room anyway. 42 steps. A mat. A lamp. Space for a guest who would not come. The moon moved west. The dunes cooled. Somewhere a jackal howled, and the sound was the only answer the desert gave. 1 year later, Cairo still smelled of the river at dawn. The Nile slid past the city thick and brown, carrying reed boats, fish bones, and the low songs of boatmen. Amadou woke to those songs every morning, the same 3 notes repeated until they became the rhythm of his new life. He rose from the reed mat in the tiny room above the dye shop, 42 steps up, the ladder creaking under his weight, and opened the cracked window. The alley below was already busy. A boy leading a donkey loaded with onions, a woman balancing a jar on her head, a cat asleep on a sack of indigo. The room had changed little. The mat was patched now, the clay lamp mended with copper wire. A single shelf held 3 things: a small iron pot, a twist of salt wrapped in cloth, and 1 camel bell, bronze, green with age, bought for 2 copper vals in the Friday market. Amadou rang it once each morning, a soft clink asterisk that traveled down the stairs and into the alley. It was his way of greeting the day, the way porters once greeted each other with proverbs. He ground millet the same way every dawn. The stone was round, worn smooth in the center. He poured a handful of grains, exactly 120, counted aloud the way Modibo had taught him, then rocked the upper stone back and forth. The sound was steady, comforting: scrape, scrape, scrape. Flour dust rose pale in the shaft of sunlight. When the millet was fine enough, he mixed it with water from the clay jar, added a pinch of the precious salt, and set the pot on a tiny charcoal brazier. Breakfast for 1. The indigo veils came next. He patched them with thread dyed the same deep blue, stitching small, neat rows the way Fatimata had once mended her cloak under the date palms. The dye shop below paid him in coin and cloth. He had learned to mix the indigo paste, to stir it slow so the color set true. His hands were always stained, the cracks in his skin filled with blue. When children in the alley asked why, he told them, "The desert follows me. This is its shadow." He owned 1 camel now, a thin, sway-backed beast named Tinduma * after the dried Oasis. The animal lived in a stable 2 streets away, fed on river grass and the occasional handful of dates Amadou saved from his own meals. Every 7th day he led the camel to the Nile, let it drink its fill, then loaded it with patched veils and carried him to the women's market. The Tuareg traders knew his face now. They nodded when he passed, but no one spoke Fatimata's name. The baby came on a night when the river ran high and the moon was hidden by clouds. Amadou was patching a veil by lamplight when he heard footsteps on the ladder, slow, uncertain. He opened the door. A woman stood there, veil pushed back, face thin with travel. In her arms she carried a bundle wrapped in indigo cloth. The baby was small, dark, eyes the color of wet sand. A thin scar curved near the corner of its mouth. Fatimata did not speak at first. She stepped inside, set the bundle on the mat, and unwrapped it. The child slept, fists curled like tiny shells. Amadou knelt. The baby smelled of milk and camel and long roads. He touched one small hand. The fingers opened, then closed around his thumb. My husband died at the Gao wells, Fatimata said. Her voice was hoarse, the same low note she had used to calm storms. Fever. 3 days. The tribe took the camels. They said a widow guides no one. She reached into her pouch and drew out the broken silver ring. 2 halves tied together with a strip of palm fiber. She placed it on the shelf beside the camel bell. Clink. The sound was soft, final. I walked, she said. 40 days. The baby on my back. The song in my mouth. Chip. Lift, stack. Ehen, Amana, Tanarawen. Amadou looked at the child, at the ring, at the woman who had once been a desert rose. The room was small, the mat narrow, the pot barely enough for 2. He stood, lifted the baby gently, and settled it against his shoulder. The weight was new, warm, alive. Fatimata watched, eyes dry now, the desert's lesson learned. He rang the camel bell once. Clink. The baby stirred, sighed, slept again. Outside, the boatman's song drifted up the alley, 3 notes repeated. Amadou began to hum the Tuareg lullaby under his breath, the one that had guided him through the storm. Fatimata joined, her voice weaving with his, soft as indigo thread. They ground millet together the next morning. 2 hands on the stone now. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The flour was enough for 3 small flatbreads. They ate them hot, salted, shared with the baby who gummed the edge and laughed for the first time. The sound filled the room like water filling a dry cup. The desert had taken their water, the gold, their illusions. It had given them time. Slow, stubborn, measured in footsteps and heartbeats. And time, patiently, had become love. Years later, travelers in the Cairo markets would see a small shop above the dye alley. A man with blue-stained hands sold indigo veils finer than any in the city. A woman with a scar near her mouth guided customers to the best cloth, her voice calm as a lullaby. A child with eyes the color of wet sand rang a bronze camel bell at dusk, calling the family home. And on the shelf behind them sat a broken silver ring, 2 halves tied forever, proof that some circles close slowly, 1 grain of sand at a time.